Welcome to the MasterYourMix podcast, helping engineers, producers, and artists create professional recordings and mixes even from home. I'm your host, Mike and Davina. Let's get started. Hey guys, welcome to the MasterYourMix podcast. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Mike and Davina, and I also just want to take a quick second just to acknowledge all of the longtime listeners that have been listening to all the previous episodes and continue to share this podcast with their friends and share it online. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. In today's episode, I'm really excited because I get to interview someone whose work I really admire, and I think that he has an amazing ear for detail. His name is Richard Chycki. He's worked with artists such as Rush, Dream Theater, Pink, Mick Jagger, and a whole bunch more. Now, when it comes to mixing, it's really important to pay attention to the little details. Sometimes it's just like little ghost notes or something like that on the drums. But when it comes to a band like Rush or Dream Theater, there's a lot of these little technical details that can sometimes get lost in the mix and people can overlook. But I think that Richard has a great ear for noticing all of these things and making sure that they come out in the mix. So I was really excited to get the chance to talk with him and learn from him. And in the interview, I think that he shares some amazing advice on how you can improve your productions and overall experience within the studio. And he also shares a bunch of really great stories from the studio, and one of which, as soon as he said it, just like immediately scared the crap out of me. I think it's a very important lesson that all engineers need to learn and hopefully don't have to learn the hard way after hearing Richard tell the story. It's something that was almost a career-ending mistake that he could have made, and it came on an album that was really a pinnacle album in his career that really shot off his career and got it going and working with a lot of big artists. So I'll let him tell the story. So without further ado, let's not wait anymore. Let's just jump right into the interview. Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast, Richard.
Appreciate being here. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Really appreciate it. So for people who might not be familiar with who you are and your background, can you give us a little bit of story on how you got started, what you do?
Sure. A lot of times I do mix work, mixing, engineering, and production. My background, I come from a musical background. I started off by being in a band. I do what I do because, I started this quite a while ago, and I thought musicians recorded themselves. And that's really how I got into it, because I thought it was just a natural byproduct of being a musician, that we had to know all of this extraneous knowledge about how to record ourselves and how to capture what we do. And so I learned that at a very young age. Like in my teens, I was hunting down multi-track machines and learning how to record and reading like the RCA recording handbook, like really dry technical knowledge, but it was something that would become useful in later life. I started by I was trying to get a record deal for my band, and I had a friend of mine who had a rehearsal space and recording studio in a all-in-one building in Toronto, and he had asked me if I would for a few bucks, if I would take care of the place at night, let bands in, lock them out when they were done rehearsing. And he said, yeah, if you want to use the studio, please go ahead. Just don't blow anything up. And so I spent a lot of time writing and learning how to record in that room. And there was also the benefit of traffic from other bands. They would poke their head in and, hey man, what are you working on? And the dialogue was started. Hey, I'm working on my own stuff. And, oh, wow, that sounds cool. Hey, you should record our band sometime. And, of course, all these bands were trying to get record deals as well. So I started to get just natural promotion by these bands sending stuff to record companies and the managers and other people. And I started to get calls from record companies. And they would say, hey, do you want to record some demos? It started off by recording demos, like writing demos for bands. And I was working with bands at the time like Tragically Hip and Jeff Healey and all these other guys. And at the same time, I was working at my aspirations to be in a signed band and touring. And but the recording kept growing very quickly. And I got to a point where I went, I kind of have to start making a choice of which way I'm going with this. And I was working with with Jeff Healey. I put quite a bit of time in with him, and the great thing about them is they really like to work with marquee producers like Joe Hardy, Tom Panunzio, and there's one other guy named Marty Fredrickson. And Marty, who's a great songwriter and a great multi-instrumentalist and a producer, we worked on one of the final Jeff Healey records, and we had a great time working together. And at the time, I was, we were pretty cutting edge. We were doing everything in Pro Tools as opposed to tape, so we were in that transitional period. And he had mentioned, that hey, we're going to work together sometime in the future. Which is always great to hear, but, it's one of those things that, you just keep doing what you do. And, 10 months later, I got a call from him, and that was, he just said, hey man, you want to come record drums? I really like what you do, with recording drums. And, I've got a 5-day gig in Boston. Do you want to do that? And I went, yeah, sure. Great. It was, I wanted to do work outside of Canada. And so I took the gig right away, and I said, but then after all of accepting the gig and the arrangements are starting to be made, I went, oh, by the way, who is it? He says, well, it's Aerosmith, man. So, I proverbially crap myself, and but it was awesome. It was a really, really great opportunity. And I ended up going down there for 5 days. I went in going for 5 days, and Stephen and Joe met with me after the 5 days and asked me to stay on as the chief, and so I ended up doing 11 months with them to do Just Push Play, and that record sold, I don't know, I think it was 2 million and change.
Wow.
So yeah, and Jaded was a number one. It was a number one at Rock Radio and Billboard for quite a while. So that was kind of the dividing line in my career, and then since then, it's just been kind of jumping from one band to the next.
That's the dream right there.
It's really great. I have a lot of work, I mean, I wish it was as fast as me just telling you this in a few minutes.
Well, it sounds like you had something that was a really defining moment in your career that really skyrocketed it from there, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. There's kind of, I call that the red line. There's the everything before that, and then everything after was a completely, it's been a completely different ride from before.
How do you think your career would differ if that didn't happen?
That's a really good question. I mean, I had gone through some difficult sessions, which in my opinion, in hindsight, were very valuable because they trained me. They trained me to handle higher pressure sessions in the studio, where. One of the major things that when I talk at schools or I do any sort of discussion with anybody about the entertainment industry is that the people's skills are by far the strongest asset. You have to know your technical knowledge, but people's skills are by far the strongest asset to get through the industry.
Definitely. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. And that, as much as that's entertainment industry, I think that kind of applies to everything in general, but, in the music industry, it seems to be particularly prominent.
Definitely, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You had mentioned that you were in a band. What instrument do you play?
Guitar.
Guitar?
Guitar's actually in a band with James Labrie from Dream Theater. We were chasing the dream together.
Wow.
And then once once we had decided to wrap that up, I got together a bunch of demos and a bunch of photos for him that he ultimately sent off to Dream Theater so we could do the audition and end up in the band.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How do you feel your ability to play guitar has influenced the work that you do?
My ability to play guitar, it's being able to relate to musicians, I guess on a one-to-one level. I work with a lot of guitar players, so being able to do guitar speak with them is very valuable. To say, I'm looking for this. Do this. This feels rushing. Feels like there's a bit more palm muting. This, you can actually say, hey, you have to adjust your technique this way so that it affects this sonically. So I find that makes it that makes it much easier, and to be able to keep the pace in the studio.
Yeah, I think that that's totally really important to have.
Yeah.
Nothing more frustrating. I feel as a drummer, a lot of producers I've worked with in the past don't know how to play drums. They know how to play guitar or keys or something like that. And it's so frustrating sometimes to not have them communicate in the same way that I kind of need to hear it.
Right. Right.
I think it's super important to understand how to communicate with musicians.
Absolutely. And I mean, there is a compromise. I would think that, for instruments that, we all can't play everything, of course, unless we're Jordan Rudess, who seems to be able to play everything. But, if, we all can't play all instruments. So, to be able to relate to, an oboe player or anybody else, I think that there's just trying to get an understanding of what they do and we relate it to them as best we can, right? I mean, it's definitely not a perfect world, but, the more knowledge we have on hand, the more valuable it is.
For sure.
Uh-huh.
So tell me about your studio setup these days. Do you have a home base, or are you kind of traveling all over the place?
I travel all over the place. When I'm recording, I mean, I haven't recorded in Canada. I'm in Toronto, Canada. My home base is Toronto, Canada, for family. But I travel a lot for work. Typically, the last time I recorded in Canada would have been Rush, Clockwork Angels, and that was at the end of 2011. Other than that, I'm usually traveling. I do have a setup for mixing. It's a full-fledged mix room with like an 15-foot expansion ceiling that I built 8 years ago. And I mean, I predominantly mix. I mix in the box, so makes it very efficient. So I can bring my my rig around in a single good chunky road case. So it's highly mobile and efficient.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what's your mindset when you go into a mix? How do you start? Where do you start? What are you listening for?
My first thing to do is to do an overall review and to speak with record company and artist management, speak with everybody quickly, get an idea of the lay of the land, what they're looking for, what their expectations are for the project, and to make sure that the what's recorded aligns with what the expectations are. Right, and that's really important because sometimes that it doesn't quite happen as close. So you might have to, there might be, hey, they're looking for, they're looking for these really big chunky guitars, but they're these little tiny guitars recorded. So it's, hey, do you have a DI track? You might have to do some reamping. There's all sorts of little tricks that might happen on the fly, again, depending on what the expectations are. So that's the first step, and I kind of build bottom up for my mix. I do drums, bass, guitars. I do all the core instruments, get everything sitting properly, work on vocals, and then put everything together, and then start combing through the mix over and over again and fine-tuning it.
That's cool. You had mentioned communicating with the artists and the labels and making sure that the vision aligns with what you're going to do. What happens in cases where you find the label and the artist disagree?
That's a really good question. A lot of times, with the artist, it's their record creatively. Depending again on what the relationship with the record company is. A lot of times now, with the way the industry has changed, that there's a much more of a cooperative effort with record company and artists. From a business point of view, that they're really both equally, I don't want to use the word liable, but they both have equal risk as far as releasing a record. So the cooperation level, I don't find that there's the stories that we would hear from 20 or 30 years ago about how the artist and record labels are really far apart. I find that really rare for the clients that I'm involved with. They just do what they do, and a band like Rush, they go out and they can tour for 2 years if they want. So I don't really think a record company is going to be freaked out about the decisions that they make for their albums, because they're ridiculously consistent artists for 30 or 40 years. So
fair enough, yeah.
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. What makes a great mix then?
Emotional translation is what makes a good mix. How does it make somebody feel? If from an artist point of view, if it makes them kind of relive when they were recording it, there might be a certain feeling that they get about how great. Oh God, that solo felt awesome. This felt awesome. This track makes me really excited, And if that emotion can be perpetuated after the record is done, then it's a really good mix. From the artist's point of view, from a listening point of view, if that emotion can get translated to the artist, to the listener, and that's consistent, the more people that happens to, then that's a good mix.
Definitely. So how long do you find it normally takes you to finish a mix then?
Really varies, anywhere from 3 hours to 3 days. There isn't any ruling. The one benefit I can say is by mixing. When I mix in Pro Tools, the great thing about it is it's possible for the artist now to live with the mix and go, I'm kind of hearing these small changes, and they can be really intricate changes. And because the mix just recalls in about 90 seconds, it's really easy just to do an update, reprint, and send it back off. So the era of compromised mixing has dropped substantially, because you don't have to go to a studio, do an analog recall, and then cross your fingers that it comes back exactly the same. So that's a great thing.
So you said between 3 hours and 3 days. That's quite a wide range. So how do you know when you're done a mix then?
There's a certain feeling. There's a certain feeling when everything starts to click in. Depending on the size of the mix, there's, say when you start off, there's if it's a dense mix track wise, there's a certain feeling, I guess, of there can be a feeling of shell shock, where there's like, oh man, there's a lot of stuff, and how do I place this? And then breaking it down into chunks and taking care of each instrument. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, this is starting to feel like a song. And I think that all of a sudden everything clicks in. And, when you start to get that emotional translation as a mixer, what I had mentioned before about emotional translation, like going to the artist, that's something from a mixing point of view that we feel that too. So when that feeling is consistent, all of a sudden it gets to a point of, this feels pretty good. What could I do to improve it? And when that question starts to be difficult to answer, then we're getting close to the end.
I like that. That's a great answer. You've been doing this for quite a while now. At what point did you feel like you really started to make good mixes?
Well, I listened to some of the ones I did quite a while ago, and they were awful. So, I mean, it's one of those things that mixing is it's a continual learning experience. So I would hope that we would run into each other 5 years from now, and we could say, what do you do now that's better than 5 years ago? And I could answer. So it's a continual learning thing. I mean, we can listen to something that's technically average, but if the emotional translation is fantastic, we could say that's a good mix, right? Because there's the limitations of technology, say from 20, 30, 40 years ago. There's some pretty great records from that era that, if
Very
we,
true.
We listen to a record, we can listen to an old record. We go, hey, that record, that doesn't sound anything like now with the extended bottom end and the, full frequency response. But you know what? It moved tens of millions of people. So, there's a lot of value to it as a piece of artist expression.
Very true. I agree with that 100%. And yeah, I think that just the way technology is always changing, we're always going to be advancing to some degree, and we'll look back at, like you said, we'll look back 5 years from now and think that our mixes now suck, probably.
Well, it's you brought up a really good point of, there's something in there, say, about technology, things advancing. With technology, there's been a large homogenization of the tools that we use. If you look back, say, 30 years ago, you had to go into a major facility, and you had to have a major console that was $500,000, and you were using a $280,000 tape machine. And now you can go and download Reaper and have a good, you buy if you really want to go top end, you can get like a Neve mic pre and a great microphone, and that little that simple chain is going to give you the ability to make a great record. So really what it comes down to is the homogenization is that we all have very similar tools, right? They're available to the masses. So we've gone a full circle where it really comes down to us as both musicians and engineers and mixers, but it comes down to us to be creative and innovative. So it's a great time, and that it really just, we've nullified a lot of the technology and just said, okay, now it's come right back to us. How hard do we work? What's our discipline like as people? So it's a really great time.
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you agree that like a lot of people still think that you need to have that Neve preamp or that high end piece of gear in order to sound better, and like you said, everything is accessible these days, so those things are much more affordable. But do you think that that's still the case, that you do need to have that high end gear, or can somebody do it with like a $200 Scarlett?
Well, I think that there is there's a reasonable compromise there. That to say I'm going to do my absolute best work with garbage, I think is it possible? Yeah, I suppose. But, if I were to say, put that to you for drums and say, hey, you know what? You do great work. So I'm going to put you on a $99 drum kit with, with those old foil cymbals. Do you remember the Christmas drum? Remember the Christmas drum kits that used to be in Sears for $99?
Oh yeah, with the little rivets to make it sound like it's got some shimmer on it.
So you look at that, and it really, you could probably do something that's pretty interesting on that. But if I were to say, hey, we're going to put you on a $2,000 drum kit, you could do a fantastic performance, and the drums will sound good. And then if you get the law of diminishing returns, we could put you on a $50,000 drum kit that has that might have the copper plating, custom copper plating on all of the hardware, and then the really, really, really done. And yes, it will be better. Yes, it'll be marginally better. But I think there's a law of diminishing returns. And if you were to ask me, do you want somebody to sing through an SM57? Do you want somebody to sing through an SM57, or somebody to sing through a 1953 U47? If I had a choice, I'm going to take the better singer with the better song and the 57. I would do that first. So really it comes down to having a singer that is really great and knows how to connect emotionally, and really have a great song. I think there are tons of records that are technical. They're amazing technically. There are tons out there, but really the trick is to have a record that is technically amazing, and then have amazing songs and amazing musicians. That combination is, like, from an engineer, producing and mixing point of view, that is what we look for, is that combination, not one or the other.
Yep, I absolutely love that. I agree with all of that. And it's interesting that you bring up that example of the 57 and the 47. I've once heard, and I don't know if you could shed some light on this because you have worked with Aerosmith, but I've heard that Steven Tyler was recorded with the 57 at some point. I don't know if it was any of the sessions you worked on, but
not any of the ones I worked on. With Steven, okay. we used a AKG C12. Okay. We used a C12 with him. I don't have recall notes in front of me. If I were to remember, I would say a C12, probably a Neve pre, and we were quite on the distressors then, so it was probably either a distressor or a TubeTech CL1B.
Okay.
So those are, we never used that. With him, we used this one of the C12, the VRs, the reissues, right? So
yep.
But that's a good example. That's a good microphone, and it's expensive, but it's not stratospherically expensive. Do you know what I mean? It's not like if you go down to Blackbird in Nashville, he has a dozen. McBride's got like a dozen or a dozen and a half Elam 251s that are $22,000 a piece, or whatever the current market value is. There's all sorts of amazing mics that he's got. The C12 is a great mic as well, but Steven is Steven. He sounds ridiculously good no matter what he sings in.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Yeah.
What's something that you like to do with your mixes that other people might think you're a little crazy for doing? Do you have any sort of experimental chains that you like to work with, or?
That is a song-to-song thing. That's a good question, but it really varies from song to song and from what the what the artist is doing and what the if I were to do a modern rock radio mix, like say something like Skillet, that's going to be a lot different than if I'm working on, say, a Dolores O'Riordan song where she wants to, hey, I've got this little vocal scream and I want that to continue forever and slowly degrade, and then I want the band to stop and I just want the echo left. All of that. That kind of effects and routing is going to be a lot different than, say, what I would do for somebody that says, hey, I need a song done for rock radio.
So then, I guess in terms of the, aside from the normal cleanup of making tracks sound nice and clear, how do you go about making more of those creative moves in mixing? Is it something that you always discuss with the artist ahead of time, or is that something that you kind of just do and then hope that they like it, or what's your approach to that kind of thing?
It's a combination of both. Sometimes there's the artist has recorded something and they have some particular features in mind, and in that case, what I'll do is I'll listen to what they've done. There've been points where they've done something really interesting, and I just use it in the mix. Or it might be something where I could see what they're trying to do, and I say, you know what, just give me that little piece as a reference, and let me work it up at this end, and then I'll get artist approval that way, right? So there's a combination of different things that or if. One more thing is if, say, there's a piece where the artist has done something vocally and then after it there's a hole, I might fill it in with some delays or some call and answers that are, I'll do almost like a radio effect afterward, just to fill in the holes. There's that sort of thing, little tricks that, if I feel the energy of the track is changing, and I'm going, yeah, it feels like it should be building up, not loosening up right there, then, I'll add in something. And generally, it's kind of like reading the music. If I can feel where it's supposed to be going, then I'll adjust the mix accordingly.
That's great. When you get sessions sent to you for a mix, what problems do you frequently see in terms of how the mixes are sent to you?
A couple different things. You had brought up cleaning up tracks. With the proliferation of home studios, one of the major things coming in are sort of noise anomalies where, I did a mix last year, and I was playing the track through, and I was going, what is that sound? I would hear this thing off in the distance, and what is it? And on a background vocal track, the guy had recorded some background vocals in his apartment, and I don't know what city he was in, but he had his window open, and it was a bus. It was a bus leaving a bus stop, and it's like, what is that? Or I've recorded, I've gone to mix something and I'm watching my speakers slowly move in and out, and I'm going, what is that? And I stopped. I couldn't hear anything, but I could hear my speakers mechanically going. Well, it turns out that they'd recorded some acoustic guitar in a building, again, another home studio environment where the air conditioner was on the roof of the building, but it wasn't done for a studio, so it was coupled to the building. It was bolted straight to the building, and it was vibrating the building at about 4 or 5 hertz. So, they hadn't high-passed their microphones or anything, so there were all these weird, sub-frequencies that were recorded. So it's all that sort of stuff, going through and technically bringing the quality up to studio standards. Let me add one more thing, that there's, as far as home studio, one of the things that I discuss is that when we talk about like a commercial studio and a home studio, there's 2 components to each of the phrases: commercial studio and home studio. The first word refers to its location. Commercial, like an industrial unit or a separate building, right? And then there's studio. That studio, in my opinion, refers to, having your room treated correctly, sonically, right? Having the room treated correctly sonically. So i.e., not a 10-foot by 10-foot bedroom with the mattress up against the back wall, and having all sorts of weird flutters and again with the air conditioning problems, all that thing. That's having a home studio is a fantastic idea, but it has to have the acoustics properly set so you can do a great job recording, and so you have a good foundation for reference for mixing. Because if your room sounds bad, doesn't matter whether it's in a commercial unit or at home, if it doesn't sound good, then you're building on a bad foundation, and you're bound to make errors in recording or mixing.
Yep, I agree with that for sure.
Uh-huh.
How do you approach gain staging in your mixes?
Gain staging is particularly important in digital, in any DAW, because once you overload the mix bus, quite often it doesn't sound so good. So I have a tendency to keep the gain staging down as the mix flow progresses. Like it's down at the beginning. I have it low. I have it loud enough so that the plugins can do their work, i.e., compressors or any saturators or anything like that. But I also have everything subgrouped in gains. I have VCAs set up so that, like if I have, let's say I've got a snare channel, and I've got let's say a snare sample, snare top, a snare bottom, and like I'll do a submix of those, and those go into a subgroup, and then I can control the level of that subgroup blending within the drum kit, and then the drum kit recombines down into a subgroup of its own, and then that subgroup is controlled by VCAs. So I can and VCAs it makes it feel very much like let's say how an SSL was done. So I can control the output of each individual instrument, so that I'm not looking at a mix that when I have no processing on my master bus, that the meters aren't pegging. So I look at my meters are usually sitting at about minus 6, maybe peaking at -3, with absolutely nothing on the master bus, and then I can do my master bus processing.
I think that's really helpful, because a lot of people don't know where to let their levels sit.
Right.
And everyone's still thinking it's like just pin it to the top, right?
Well, recordings, with digital recording, you can have, as long as we're not going over 0, the digital recording is fine. So we could have a kick drum, like I'll get in drums that are at -2, -1, and in Pro Tools, I'll just take, if I've got a single, if I have a single track, I can just gain stage the entire file down, right? So if I get a mix in and they're particularly loud recordings, not distorted but just loud, I'll go through and just do a bunch of gain staging. I'll take all the tracks down, maybe anywhere from 5 to 10 dB, so that they're manageable with the plugins, and I'm not getting into gain crisis right away.
That definitely helps.
Uh-huh.
Another thing that a lot of people definitely struggle with is getting the low end right, and people will mix their stuff, go to their car afterwards, and realize that their bass is just like completely out to lunch, and it's either too much or they don't have enough. What are some of your tips with getting the low end right?
First thing, the most important thing is you brought up listening. You brought up listening, and you take it out to their car, and it's not right. If somebody were to listen to, say, what some of their favorite records are, understanding when they listen to their favorite record, how much low end feels right there. I think that your question kind of goes back to critical listening. Really, that's what it comes down to. Like if you were to listen to a record, you go, I really like the bottom end on insert whatever your favorite album is. And once you have an understanding of that and say, well, this is enough bottom end, then there's a combination of things that we can do as far as high pass filtering, side chaining instruments, so that you have a kick drum, you can have bass. You can have a lot of bass guitar, but when the kick drum hits, you could side chain your bass so that it just dips for that little, might pull it down to dB, so that when the kick drum hits, that they're not fighting each other. that sort of thing. And then being able to sculpt the bottom end is, using a high pass filtering to remove frequencies. As your frequencies decrease, the amount of power it takes to reproduce them increases. So, there's, you don't need 10 hertz on a kick drum, that sort of thing. So if you have a lot of 10 or 15 hertz in your music, that doesn't mean there's a lot of bass there. It means you have to actually cut out those sub frequencies so that there is power left to reproduce frequencies that are valuable for us, like 60 to 80 hertz, that we could sit down and say, that kick drum has a lot of meat to it. But once you get below that, there are frequencies there that are, you could feel them a bit, but there's a compromise to how much you put in before before it overloads listening systems. From a mixing point of view, mix is a giant compromise, and I'm not using that word in a negative way. Compromise means you have to get it so that it works on as many listening environments as possible, from a great stereo system to earbuds. So if you have a mix that translates into as many listening environments as possible, it's a great mix. If you have something that can only work on, say, a $10,000 stereo system and it blows up everything else, you're going to have a lot of people that go, I can't play that mix back. So in reality, it's the approach might be really interesting, but it's not a very useful mix. So there's it is learning to get a compromise so that it plays in as many on as many stereos, playback media as possible.
That's great. It definitely sounds like you're an advocate for using reference tracks as well, right?
Absolutely. It's one of those things that I'm not saying, hey, copy. You're listening to band X and you say, hey, yeah, just copy that. I'm not advocating that, but there are things that if you have somebody that has you hear something on radio that it translates well on radio and it sounds really fantastic, and then you listen to it on you can listen to it on iTunes or Spotify, or you listen to a CD and it translates through all these different media. There's a value to learn and understand what the mixer and the artist have done to make that happen, and that's great knowledge to figure out.
For sure. So we all learn from trial and error and making mistakes in the studio. Can you think of any examples of something that maybe went wrong in a session that you learned a very valuable lesson from?
Yes, got a good one for you.
All right.
So, middle of recording, just push play. We were recording some guitar with Joe Perry, and he was recording away. And generally, when Joe was playing, we would do start. When he would do something he didn't like, it would start, stop, cue back, continue forward. Right. So we're kind of moving ahead in steps. And so he had stopped and pressed spacebar to stop recording. Didn't stop recording. And all of a sudden, we on the older Apple systems, you used to get this little graphic of a bomb when the computer crashed, right? So all of a sudden, the screen went gray, and we got this bomb, and it said, usually you would say, you to get this bomb, and it would say an error of minus some cryptic number, right?
Yeah.
An error of minus 1014 has occurred. Please restart your system, right? Anyway, so we got a number that said an error of negative point, and then it was this decimal, and it went through the box, and it went right off the page, right off the screen. And I'd never seen that before, and I went, this is bad, right? This is bad.
Yeah.
Restarted, and we restarted, and the record was gone.
Oh, no.
Gone. Directory, please format your disk, right? It was gone. So, I probably turned a really good, probably good either white or gray, more than my normal white or gray, and Joe just said, "Well, boys, let me know when you got it ironed out," and he just walked out, and we were crapping because we didn't know what sort of damage had occurred, but we had backed up, and this isn't quite how it was now. This was like backups with tape. digital, right, with Exabyte and all sorts of stuff like that. And so we started to restore. We had to restore the record.
Wow.
We had to restore the record from the backup we had done. But it's one of those things. You do backups, but the likelihood of really needing them to this extent that hadn't happened to me before. So again, it's from tapes. It was painfully slow, and we restored it. And at the end of the day, which was late at night, I went and talked to the band. Out of all of it, we had lost one acoustic guitar that was recorded that day. So
Wow,
as far
that's
as
pretty good.
mistakes go, the biggest thing I could say is back up religiously, because I tell you, when that happened, had we not been doing that, I mean, we were really far into the record. So the cost of not backing up would have been unbelievably expensive. So back up,
Yeah.
and then back up again, and take stuff and have it off-site and have multiple copies. And to this day, when we record, like when I work with Dream Theater, we have 3 copies at all times, and we're rotating through them, and they travel separately. We have the master copy that stays in the studio, and then I take a copy, and the assistant engineer who doesn't travel with us takes a copy. So we have 3 copies of the album that are in 3 individual locations, so that it's the possibility of losing the album is very low. So that would be the biggest learning lesson.
That Aerosmith album, was that your first album that you'd worked on with them?
Yes, yeah, it was.
Wow. So like
It was.
going back to what we originally talked about, how that was like one of the defining moments in your career, that
Yeah.
could have ended it, right?
It could totally have ended it, and it was one of those things that doing the preparation and the going through with the assistant, you'd say, hey, listen, okay, well, we're taking off. You need to wait here till it's done, and he'd be like, oh man, and it's because backups then would take 4 hours, 5 hours, and it's like, dude, bring a book, bring a book. You got to stay here, and you got to take care of this. And so all of that. Of staying on people and having them work on that religiously, all of that worked out to be a great benefit and save the album.
Yeah. I think that story perfectly encapsulates why you need to back up stuff.
You cannot believe the sensation of when that system reboots and everything was just scattered. There were one drive had failed and the other one became corrupt as a result. And I cannot tell you the feeling of I can't even describe it. It was just
my heart sank as soon as you mentioned it. Like, it scared the crap out of me.
Oh, yeah.
So I can only imagine what it was like being in there.
Dude, I'm reacting like I could feel. I just feel like I've drank like a double espresso in my hands. I can feel myself getting nervous just reliving the sensation of that. So let's talk about something happier.
So, fair enough. What's a good lesson that you've learned from another producer or mixing engineer?
One of the things I really enjoyed with producers that I worked with that got great results from the artist is the whole concept of having fun, because it's something that is keeping the artist level and not bogging the artist down with technical any technical details, unless of course they're asking specifically about it. But it's keeping the artist in their creative zone. I had worked with a producer years ago named Joe Hardy, and Joe was incredible in that he would have a great time with the artist, and he was a really technical guy, really knowledgeable, and he would deal with the artist on their level. As soon as that talkback mic would click off, we had a good relationship. He knew that I had a good technical background, so he would all of a sudden click in. He said, "I need this, this, and this, and this done," and then would click back, and he would deal with the artist on their level. And we would, he would go from a creative to technical mindset, at the drop of a hat. And that was something that was that I found really great, because he pulled a lot out of the artist. And any producer that I've worked with that really knows how to work with the artist and keep everything positive, I found that to be something that was something really moved me, and it stayed with me through my career.
That's very cool. I really appreciate that as well. I think you want to create memories for people in the studio, right? And not just be those technical memories.
Yeah, exactly. And the one of the things I find really gratifying is, I'll work with an artist, and these days how they're the making of, or afterward the artist they'll go through and do a track by track on YouTube, or they'll do interviews, and they'll talk about the record and how it was to make it. And one of the things that's really gratifying is the artists will say how much fun they had and what a great vibe it was. And like all of the technical minutia that goes on, or they didn't bring any of that up. They brought up that they had a great time, and it was a good feeling for them. And in my opinion, that the artist is in an environment that is really you're prone to make a good record because you feel good, as opposed to being you're feeling shitty. If you feel shitty, I just don't think you do your best work, as opposed to just feeling awesome and say, I'm gonna play the best track ever. And you as a drummer, right? If you feel awesome, you come in and feel pumped up and everything's working, and you feel like you could do your best work, then you're in a prime situation to do that. And I think that's very valuable.
Definitely. Do you master your own mixes?
I try not to. But I do them. Not all the time. It all depends on what the project is. I'm absolutely fine to do that. I prefer to have another set of ears after the fact. But, it's one of those things that, because of the nature of how loud mixes are these days, that what I'll end up doing is I have two versions of mixes running. Well, I'll have the straight off the console mix, and then I'll have one that I get the mix so it's kind of in the realm of what the artist is expecting to hear when it's mastered. And because if they go and listen to, hey, I'm going to listen to my last record, and then they listen to the new one and it's 10 dB quieter, they're not going to be very satisfied with that. And then you're asking them to, oh no, but the mix is fine, so I just need you to, hey, just imagine it's like this. And I don't think that's the best. That's not the best environment for the artist to, if they all of a sudden have a negative feeling about the record before they start listening to it because it's not as satisfying. That's not really that good. So I'll get the mix that it's in the zone, and I'll pass those mixes along to the mastering engineer, as well as the sort of the straight off the console mixes that are around -12, -10, and say, here's what they've been listening to, and they've signed off on this vibe. So, and they'll go from there.
And then what are you expecting from the mastering engineer?
Not to change the mix. So not to change the mix, meaning, what, if the mix comes back and it's louder within reason, if the mix comes back smashed, or if the mix comes out where they say the attack time of the limiting is so fast that the snare drum disappears and the guitars come flying out more than how I left it, then I'll flag the engineer and say, yeah, I don't want that. So I have a tendency to say, here's this is what the artist has signed off on, and I'm monitoring that as well, and that feels pretty good. So as long as it doesn't go by the wayside, and the mixes stay consistent. A lot of times mastering engineers, I like the idea that they'll pace the album, kind of go old school. They'll pace the album. They'll make the EQ consistent from track to track, because their way of listening is linear. They'll listen to songs that are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They'll go through the songs. They'll reference bits of of the album to see, so that it feels consistent. As mixers, we'll go, if we're mixing, we'll do, okay, we're doing song 4 today, so we listen to 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. Then we do, we're doing track 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. So we listen to each track repeatedly as we develop it, right? And we refer back and forth, and we can make little changes toward the end. But it's the mastering engineer. He's hearing it fresh. We've been working, say, on a record for 4 to 6 months, and he'll go through and just go linearly and go, okay, well, I just I added a little bit of 90 hertz here at half a dB because this other track really, this had a little bit extra bottom end to it, and this one really felt, this one spoke to me a bit better, so I did that to this one as well. So that that's what the mastering engineer does to make Rich, the mixing guy, happy.
I think that's great, because I think there are a lot of people out there who think, well, if I'm going to a mastering engineer, that my mix should change, like they should be doing something. But it's refreshing to hear someone who kind of just wants them to just tell you that you're right.
Well, more or less, or if there's something that's, if there's something that they're hearing, if there's something that they're hearing that that's really valuable. If they say, "Hey, man, where are you mixing this? This is different from something you've normally done." There's there have been times where I've done a remote, and they'll say, "Yeah, this one sounds different than this," and I'll go back and I'll say, "Oh, I'll recall and I'll make a compensation, based on what their opinion is, because they're cold. They've come in cold, and they'll." And when I say a recommendation, it's not like, oh my, the world is coming down. It's a small change, and for me as a mixer, I try to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to deliver. I want to deliver a master that the guy, all he does is he puts it up to close to dig 0 and leaves it, and he didn't have to do anything else to it. So, I mean, that's ultimately from a mixing point of view what I like. What I can recommend to younger engineers and mixers. Really, our job is kind of like doctors. Don't make the situation worse. Don't make the patient worse, right? So what I'm saying is, like, if you're in a if you're in when I was talking about home studios before, if you're in a home studio, and you have a room that sonically does not sound good, do your best to have no sound as opposed to bad sound. I.e., make your room dead, because that is better than having bad sound. And when you have when we see all these, you ever see those things with that go around microphones when you're singing? And I don't have any brands that I could give you. Have you seen these things? They're like almost like semicircles, and they're these little soundproof things, and you put your vocal mic in them.
Yep.
And what that does is that really just removes it. It attempts to remove the sound of the room acoustics and make it dry. So anyway, and I'm getting to this from a mixing point of view. If you don't know how to, if you can't manipulate a bus compressor so that the mix feels good to you, just don't compress it. Tell your mastering guy, be open. Here, this is what I have. I was a little unsure about my bus compressing, so if you can help me with that, that'd be great. And they're going to appreciate that, rather than giving them something that's smashed all to hell with an L1 or L2. It's all smashed to death and they can't help you. Rather than doing that, give them something that is, even if it's overly dynamic, but just make the mix as best as you can make it, and relate your situation to the mastering engineer, and he or she will appreciate that more than trying to say, hey, I made this like radio and my release time is so fast that it's distorted. Can you get rid of that distortion? They're going to appreciate being able to be creative at their end and make the mix sound as good as possible for you. And you know what? If your mix sounds better because you're open with the mastering engineer and didn't make technical errors on the way, then he's going to pick up the ball and take it over the finish line for you. And you know what? If you have a better mix that's on radio, you're going to get better projects, and you're going to learn to do better work as you go forward.
That's great. Definitely love all of that. There's a lot of people who are listening to this podcast who might just be getting started in their careers. Do you have any advice for someone who's just starting out with mixing?
Starting with mixing is first off to learn. We had talked about managing bass, managing low end. That doesn't. If you want more bass, that actually doesn't necessarily mean turning up the bass. It might mean high passing it slightly, high passing it so that you're not putting the energy into frequencies that we don't use in music that often, i.e., 10 hertz or 15 or 20 hertz that are so low that having a little bit in there gives us that low end body, but having too much just pulls away from the speakers being able to do their job. So it's learning, learning what frequencies, if we say, hey, that vocal sounds harsh, what frequencies denote harshness? So how do we cut that? How do we deal with it? How do we set an EQ? Learn how to EQ. Learn about what compressing does to make an instrument sound better. Learn what too much compression does to make it sound worse. If we say we need guitars brighter, does that mean we add, 15K? Or, well, that would certainly make it brighter, but we're also adding a bunch of frequencies that we typically don't have on electric guitars, and we can't turn up the guitar in the mix. So it literally is learning how frequencies interact and learning how to place instruments so that we can hear everything, right? There is a method to the madness to work through EQs to get everything so it sounds nice and cooperates together.
For sure. Yeah, I think it all comes back to what you were saying earlier, just about critical listening.
It is.
And kind of doing that trial and error and making those mistakes, but critically listening to what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What about with someone who's getting started and trying to get new clients? Do you have any advice for that?
Absolutely. Top one is be enthusiastic. Main one, do not be an asshole. Period. Do not be an asshole. I know it sounds funny, and I've been going through the how to sort of phrase this politically correct, and I just went, you know what? I think being politically correct is not correct. Do not be an asshole. Do not be entitled. That feeling that, hey, I went to school X, therefore I don't think I have to do that job. I've been doing this for a long time, and I was working on the last Dream Theater record, and I was making coffee, and I said, hey, John Petrucci, John, you want coffee? Yeah. Made coffee for me. He looked at the assistant. He goes, Jimmy T, this coffee's better than you. How come he's making better coffee than you? And it was just a joke, but it's just the moral of my story is that, you know what? I still do stuff. I still, I still clean up at the end of the day. I still, I'll still wrap up cables. I still do these things. That there's not the feelings of entitlement that say, oh, I've gone to a school. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do that. Well, the industry has also changed that. We may not do a session where we have 3 assistants or an assistant and 2 runners or something like that. Those sessions have also changed. So it really is being able to do a job, be the guy in the room that people want to hang out with. If you feel that if you're angry about stuff, or, if you're not feeling good and you translate that feeling to the artist, you will probably not get a call back. I have some clients like with Rush. I've been working with Rush since 2004, and it's 2017. We still do stuff together. So yep. That to me that speaks volumes. If you have clients that you keep for a long period of time, then that's very valuable, and that's how you get them, because they recognize somebody as a team player that knows how to resolve problems and to be to have a carry a good demeanor, especially under difficult circumstances.
It's all about the customer service and making
totally
people feel valued. Yep.
Totally is, and more so than ever, because now we have studios everywhere. They're all over the place now, whether they're in homes or wherever. They're very common now because studios cost a fraction of what they used to cost to be able to put them together. Mm-hmm. So all of this makes it important that we do our best to have great customer service, and people will remember that.
For sure. I 100% agree with that.
Yep.
So we got to start to wrap up a little bit, but how can people follow you online?
I invite people to go to richardchycki.com. There's a bunch of social media connections there. I'm on Twitter. My studio is on Facebook, and I just opened up Instagram, Richard Chycki, no dot. And so if anybody wants to, follow through, then I'm just getting my website reworked on right now. So I'll have my My blog will be back up and running because I have a bunch of hackers from Eastern Europe that seem to like my website a lot. So I've been working through that. But, Facebook is a great place for me to be. And again, all the social media, I'm there. And, happy to stay in touch with everybody.
Awesome. And any cool projects that you're currently working on that you can talk about?
Yeah. Right now, I'm mixing a live show right now for Dream Theater. And I have another one I'm working on that I can't discuss right now, but had we been talking 10 days from now, I could. So Dream Theater, the Dream Theater thing is the main thing, and I'm off to do a bit of work with an artist called Redeem over in Switzerland. They're a great 3-piece band, great modern rock writers, and that's my next project.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Looking forward to hearing those.
Yeah, man. Great to chat with you, Mike.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on here. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, man. Keep getting the information out there that's valuable, and it makes we need to keep the integrity of the industry in place, and you're doing a great job with that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So that was my interview with Richard Chycki. I had a great time talking with him, and I loved a lot of what he had to say about critical listening and learning how to understand your room and your monitors, the stuff on high-pass filtering and using that to enhance your low end. And I think the stories that he had to share were really impressive too, and really important. A lot of lessons there, especially that Aerosmith story and almost losing those files. I can only imagine the amount of anxiety that he must have felt in that moment. And I think that story really just shows the quality of engineer that Richard is and how he always thinks 2 steps ahead. Because sometimes as engineers, we get tired at the end of a session and we want to put things off and we're like, oh, we won't need our backup files. Everything seems to be working right now and all that kind of stuff. And it's really easy to just be lazy. So I love that story because I think it really speaks volumes to the idea of paying attention to little details, working hard, and not just giving up or ignoring the monotonous things or the boring things. It's just really pushing forward and working hard, and all of those things together will really push your career forward and have an influence on the success you have. So I want to thank Richard one more time for giving me the opportunity to chat with him. I had a great time. And guys, if this is your first time hearing about Master Your Mix, please check out the website, MasterYourMix.com. And when you go to the website, sign up to download your free copy of the Ultimate Mixing Blueprint. It's a guide that will help you with using EQ and compression in your mixes so that you can get better results faster. And once you sign up for that, you'll also be added to my mailing list where every week I send out new videos, tips and tutorials, podcast interviews, all sorts of really good stuff that's going to help you with improving your mixes. So make sure to check that out at MasterYourMix.com. Once again, it's the Ultimate Mixing Blueprint, which is a free download that you can get now. Also, guys, if you like what you heard in this podcast, please make sure to share it on social media. Leave a rating and review on iTunes. That really helps spread the word and allows me to continue to make these episodes and really help you guys with your productions. So thank you one more time, and I'll talk to you in the next episode. Take care, guys. Thanks for listening to the Master Your Mix podcast. To have your questions answered, submit your questions to questions@masteryourmix.com. Please go to iTunes and subscribe and leave a review. And for more information on how you can improve your mixes, visit MasterYourMix.com.